This is going to be a 4-hour endurance race. Me and 2 other drivers were planning to do this endurance race, however, one had an emergency and had to drop out. That left me and this other driver to have a total of 3 stints that were each 40 minutes, as well as an extra refueling time that wasn't going to be included in one of those stops. And on top of all of this, they changed the layout of the track, so we all had to relearn the track. My teammate qualified us into 3rd position, and my nerves are high. Racing when it's only me on the team is one thing, but when I have other people depending on me, that skyrockets the nerves. But it's a 4-hour endurance race, so we didn't have to be too aggressive in the start. That being said, as soon as the green flag dropped, it's like something in me changed and I could not stand behind everyone else and be patient. Something in me immediately changed and I had to go battling for the lead. Going down the front stretch, I decided to stay right behind the number 8 car, but as we got closer and closer to the turn, I look around to the outside to make a move. At this point, all my nerves have completely vanished. As only 2 turns in, I make a move for 2nd place after a crazy crossover. We now only have one goal in mind, and that is to be leading this race at the end of my first stint. So now we only have to fight one more driver. As we come around to end the first lap, we are already making some ground on the leader. However, this driver comes here a lot and I knew this would be a battle. He was not going to let me by simple. At the beginning of this race, I really struggled with hitting apexes and turns, and by the end of my stint, I felt really slow. However, this wasn't going to stop me from making any moves on the leader. Still very early on in the race, and I am catching up to this leader. This was making my confidence skyrocket, however, I knew the hard part was still coming. As we dive down to the inside, we are not going to be able to get next to him. And this carries on for multiple laps. Finally though, we're able to get right behind him and stay right behind him. I'm seeing the way he runs his line and I'm trying to improve upon mine. This gets me exactly where I want to be, right behind him. Finally, we have the speed to get alongside him, but we do not have the speed to pass him. This is great progress though, and this assures me that I have the speed to get around him eventually. Which in this part we do. As we're exiting the chicane, I managed to get to the inside of the cart. As he has to check up, we managed to clear him coming out of the last corner on the track. And we are now leading only 5 minutes into this 4-hour endurance race. However, this wasn't the end, as I could feel him bumping the back of my cart, letting me know that he was still there and racing. As I could continuously feel him tapping the back of my go-kart, the pressure was beginning to increase. When it comes to defending or being on the offensive, I'd rather be on the offensive every single time. After some time passes while I'm leading this race, he is still right behind me and we're starting to see some lap traffic up ahead. Now I'm going to be more on the offensive as I'm planning to overtake these lap traffics as quickly as I can and them being my defense. He was right behind me and as you can see, he finds an opening and takes it. After we're side by side for a little bit going through the S's, he manages to have the inside line and completely passes me. But this will not be the end of this battle and I'm not going to be giving up. Now understanding how this driver drives, I was going to be driving the same exact way, or at least planning to. He was bumping me a good amount to get around me, and I was planning to do the exact same thing. However, at the end of this straight, something terrible happens. As we go from battling the leader to spinning out, dropping us right back down into 3rd. All of that progress was now completely wasted and we're about 10 minutes into this stint. This was very frustrating and disappointing, but again, I am not planning on giving up. Not too much time goes by and we've already caught up to the number 9 cart who is lap traffic and the number 10 cart who is going to be in 2nd position. I'm looking to get around these two as quickly as possible. I have my eyes set on getting right back to that number 2 car. Although me spinning was not his fault, I wasn't too happy with how aggressive he was driving this early on in a 4-hour endurance race. Little did I know that number 2 cart was out of my future for a little bit, and this 10 cart was going to give me just as much trouble. However, after trailing behind him for just a few laps, I managed to catch up to him after a huge mistake he makes. And now I'm only focused on the leader of this race and catching right back up to him. But the number 10 cart was sticking right with me and even trying to make some moves on me. Over halfway through this stint, and again I have to go full defensive mode. He's even able to get around me for just a tiny bit before I retake second position. A lot of time has passed and I'm still just barely hanging on to second position with some lap traffic ahead of me. I managed to quickly get around them, as that was my whole goal for all lap traffic, which was to get around them as quickly as I can. Now coming to the end of my first stint, my teammate calls me in for this lap. This was going to have to be as quick as possible and lose the least amount of time. However, I came in a little bit too fast and we almost got penalized for it. As away goes my teammate, and that is the end of my first stint. Only 2 more to go. As my teammate comes down into the pits, we are going to be starting my second stint, which is going to be 3rd overall. During this stint, about halfway through, I'm going to have to be pitting for gas. And now that we're almost up to an hour and a half of racing out of 4 hours, we are currently first with a good amount of laps separating us from second place. I think at this time it was about 3 or 4. As I head onto the track, since the cart was super low on gas, this thing was flying. And during this stint, right before I hopped in the cart, I was thinking to myself that if I only do passing and don't get passed at all, we are going to be in a good spot. And now, about 2 minutes of driving in my second stint, we see our first lap traffic driver just ahead of us. Again, the main goal is just getting by them as soon as possible and not losing any time. When it was my teammate driving his first stint, I was watching how he drove the track since I wasn't super confident after I left the cart. But now, after learning from his line, I feel way more confident and I could really feel the difference inside the cart. Now we have gotten the call to come back in. After about 7 minutes of racing, we are going to come into the pits. I'm going to have to be a lot slower in order to not get penalized like last time. Thankfully though, we didn't. But all this time that we're about to lose, I need to make as quick as possible coming into the pits and then leaving the pits. As we come flying out of the chicane, I am now parking it just in front of the marshal and I hop out to discuss stuff with my teammate. We're talking about how the cart is feeling and where we are position-wise compared to the rest of the field. I think at this point we were about 4 or 5 laps ahead of the leaders, which is a super comfortable lead.
That's why you gotta shoot, right?
And now, after a long refueling period, we are heading right back out onto the track. I can definitely feel the weight difference, and this driver ahead of us, we begin a trail for some time. The driver ahead of us was currently in 3rd, so making this move around them was pretty important. Just in case things went wrong in the last half of this race, me and my teammate want as many laps separating us from second position as possible. And just because we are so far in the lead does not mean I ever stop pushing this cart. I wanted to have really fast lap times and pass as many drivers as I could so I could set up my teammate the best possible way for his next stint. Again, here's another driver who's currently racing on the podium, and I'm trying to get around him as quickly as possible. However, this guy was really able to hold me up and defend his position well. Later on in the stint, the cart began to oversteer and understeer like crazy in one half of the track. And there was very dark clouds approaching in the background. I thought this was because of rain, but it wasn't. And I'll tell you that later on in my 3rd stint, but it wasn't rain. I felt like George Russell. During this stint, we passed a few lap traffic drivers, but I'm mainly just driving by myself. I'm trying to hit my marks and be as fast as possible going around this course as I can. Some hair was also falling from my face mask into my eyes, which was really annoying and also kind of hurt. But I managed to put it aside and continue on. And while dealing with all of that, I managed to do probably my favorite overtake that I've ever done. Something that I'm a little bit proud about. My past self did a really good job. As now we're heading down to the final 5 minutes of this stint, I've been driving by myself for a very long time. And I'm now just thinking about the clouds and I'm worried about the rain. However, I have to admit that I was kind of excited for it and wanted to see how I'd compare to other drivers while driving in the rain. And now we're coming around for the final time in my second stint and we get the confirmation to come in this lap. And I'll admit, as I was putting my thumb up to confirm that I got the message, I almost spun out. Probably not the best idea to confirm with one hand on the wheel. But now we come into the pits to finish our second stint. Now my teammate is going to be starting his second stint, which means we're just over halfway now. However, something went terribly wrong. During my teammate's second stint, we had to switch out the karts. Our left front tire completely blew, which means that we had to do a kart change, and this next kart was going to be very terrible compared to the last one. And now out of nowhere, we're driving in our last stint. There was a miscommunication when I was calling him into the pits and I had to rush over. I didn't even have my gloves on, so I had to put it on while racing and had no idea if my GoPro was even filming. And on top of losing our faster kart, this kart was now 3 seconds off the pace, which meant we had an hour and a half to go while dropping 3 seconds every single lap. And on top of that, apparently the screw in my GoPro and helmet wasn't tight enough, and my GoPro decided to give me a terrible angle while looking lower and lower until it was just my helmet. This was not a super ideal position to be in. And I'm just gonna cut it short right there because the rest of the video is basically just that same angle, which is my helmet. No, I did not fix it because me putting on my gloves alone costed me about 8 seconds a lap, which isn't really good multitasking. For future endurance races, I'm probably gonna vlog more and do more about other people's stints because you lost a whole lot of information. To catch you up, I finished my stint and my teammate went out for the final stint. At the end of it, we were about only 1.5 laps ahead of second position. And to give you a reference, we were about 6 laps ahead of second place before we had to switch out our kart. Luckily, even with a bad kart, we managed to take the victory home. My teammate was doing the last stint, so he got to do this amazing moment. And after everyone got out of the kart, took some pictures, all podium finishers got to spray water on each other. So that wraps up the 4-hour endurance race. And I could not be happier with how it went. We went from 3rd position all the way to 1st position, even with a terrible kart, and our peak was 6 laps ahead of 2nd position. Huge congrats to all of our competitors, huge congrats to my teammate, and this was for you, Juan. In the future, if I do more endurance races, I'm probably gonna vlog in between because you guys missed out on a whole lot of information. But that's gonna wrap it up here. I'll see you all in the next video.